paranormal exterminators in space. Believe it or not, this was the original concept behind a beloved franchise, born from the mind of Canadian comedian Dan Aykroyd. That Aykroyd, who first rose to fame as one of the original cast members of Saturday Night Live, would be interested in an occult-based comedy is no surprise. His great-grandfather was a famous spiritualist. His grandfather conducted experiments attempting to use radios to contact the dead. His mother claimed to have seen spirits, and his father actually wrote a book entitled A History of Ghosts. A love of the supernatural was in Aykroyd's blood. So when, in 1981, he read an article from the Journal of the American Society for Psychical Research about quantum physics, he became obsessed with the idea of capturing ghosts, and decided to pursue a film that would see him and his good friends John Belushi and Eddie Murphy as a team of ghost exterminators. But, in a move fairly indicative of Aykroyd's continually unique vision for the franchise, which often seems more outlandish and complex than others might prefer, he also decided to go one step further, setting the tale in the far future and having it feature various teams of intergalactic ghost exterminators. This was clearly one high concept too many, and was, not surprisingly, deemed financially unfeasible. Thankfully, though, Aykroyd didn't drop the idea, and even though the tragic death of his good friend Belushi meant he could no longer pursue his original cast idea, he turned to another friend and comedy megastar, Bill Murray, to take Belushi's place. He then brought the idea to director Ivan Reitman, fresh off two recent successes collaborating with Murray, Meatballs and Stripes. Reitman saw value in the idea, but wisely convinced Aykroyd to drop the interstellar elements from the script and instead concentrate solely on the idea of supernatural pest control workers in modern-day New York City. Stripes co-star Harold Ramis was recruited to not only help Reitman and Aykroyd rewrite the script, but also join the cast. And eventually, up-and-coming actor Ernie Hudson was selected to fill out the on-screen team, now dubbed Ghostbusters. The extensive rewriting paid off, as, despite some initial studio reservations from Columbia Pictures about pursuing a high-budget, FX-laden comedy, the film was a massive success when released in the summer of 1984. While never necessarily intended to be a franchise starter, the concept certainly left itself open for further adventures of the Ghostbusters, proven by the success of spin-off cartoon The Real Ghostbusters, which started in 1986 and itself generated a wave of merchandise. Still, a struggle to find a story worthy of a sequel, not helped by Aykroyd once again pitching ideas considered too out there by the studio and his collaborators, not to mention difficulties convincing Bill Murray, who was both feuding with the Columbia Pictures chairman and was inherently leery about the idea of sequels in general, meant fans had to wait until 1989 to finally see Ghostbusters 2. It's safe to say, for many, the results were not worth the wait. The sequel was received far less favorably, both critically and financially, certainly not helped by being released just 1 week before Tim Burton's culture-changing Batman. The lackluster response to Ghostbusters 2 couldn't entirely kill fan enthusiasm for the franchise, however, and it certainly couldn't kill Aykroyd's desire to make a third movie. In the years that followed, Aykroyd and Sony Pictures, who had purchased Columbia in 1989, would continuously pursue a Ghostbusters 3. Various factors would complicate this pursuit. Aykroyd again pitching ideas that no one else was very excited about. Bill Murray's disinterest after the failure of Ghostbusters 2 proved his sequel apprehensions correct. A professional falling out between Murray and Harold Ramis during the making of their comedic classic Groundhog Day, and, sadly, Ramis' death in 2014, which unfortunately guaranteed any hopes of ever seeing the original team on screen together again would never be realized. Still, as nostalgia became the name of the Hollywood game throughout the 2000s, it was clear Sony would not stop trying to find a way to bring the Ghostbusters franchise back to life, so to speak. Reitman himself began pushing for the idea of remaking the original film, allowing a new cast to take the series into the future. The names of many comedic stars, Ben Stiller, Jonah Hill, Kevin Hart, Paul Rudd, were thrown around as rumored frontrunners online. But not too long after the shocking mega success of 2011's Bridesmaids, Sony would decide to pursue a somewhat surprising angle. That film's director, Paul Feig, was hired to helm the reboot, bringing along two of its lead actresses, Kristen Wiig and Melissa McCarthy, and pairing them with recent SNL breakout cast members Kate McKinnon and Leslie Jones, giving the series a new, female-led approach. 4 talented, popular stars as the new team, not to mention Thor himself, Chris Hemsworth, in a prominent supporting role, and the long-awaited on-screen return of a beloved property. It may have seemed at first like a can't-lose scenario, but neither Sony Pictures, the cast, nor Feig and his co-writer Katie Dippold had any idea of the giant controversy and cultural warfare they were about to wade into. The year is 2016, and Sony Pictures is ready to reboot and relaunch a classic franchise, Ghostbusters. 'Alright, welcome back to Failure to Franchise, the show dedicated to some of Hollywood's most infamous mistakes, missteps, and misfires. This is Trev.
And I'm Chris.
Chris, before we go any further, I got a big question for you.
Go on.
You got enough wontons over there?
I want to make sure at least you asked me that question maybe 4 or 5 times during.
Well, I just want to make sure. I know you can't record unless you've got the proper wonton to soup ratio. It's pretty important. It's
the most important part of the entire episode here.
It's almost like it's so crucial. You would think like I hope someday someone like focuses an entire structure of a film around it, because it seems like a good running gag.
It's the greatest gag. And honestly, who are you gonna call for the wontons that you so desire?
So, in case you haven't picked it up by that, or by looking at the name of the episode, what are you, a weirdo? We're, of course, today talking about 2016's Ghostbusters reboot. I guess this is where the term reboot actually applies, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Although, arguably maybe a remake, but clearly this was an attempt to kickstart the franchise again that did not work, or else we wouldn't be covering it. I don't think there's any question to us when we talked about like which movies to do early on. John Carter seemed like a natural first episode, and then Ghostbusters 2016 was right up there too. I think in recent memory, to me, those are certainly the two most infamous examples in the last few years, right? Of kind of, whoops, this did not go how we intended.
Right.
Although for much different reasons and a lot of different kind of avenues to look at with the two films. But what do you think? Are those the two that pop into your head mostly?
Oh, definitely. And also this one feels, we wanted to start it with something a little relevant, but also had some time away from it, I think. Mm-hmm. And it's been 4 years since this movie, and there was a lot of online chatter, which we'll get into. Yeah. But now it seems like it's at least been forgotten about. So maybe it's a time now that we can talk about it, and it's make it a little bit more relevant.
Not only has it been forgotten about, but this is a rare case where they've already moved on to something else, right? Like it's just kind of become really like this weird asterisk in this franchise's history because the performance of this film led to them going, whoops, let's try again. And you see that happen. I mean, the Spider-Man films are a good example of that. And now with like how Blumhouse is handling the Universal monsters instead of the Dark Universe. But this was one where definitely it was like, oh God, this clearly did not work because they just pivoted hard.
Big time.
So let's start as we often do. It's our second episode. Let's start by just even addressing what were they thinking? Right? Why in 2016 did Sony believe this film was going to work? And I have to say, to be fair, there was a lot of reasons why this did seem like a good idea on paper, right? What do you think? Do you have any do you want to lead with like some thoughts on where they were coming from?
The thoughts of continuing the Ghostbusters franchise wasn't anything new. They've been talking about it literally since the opening weekend of the first movie.
Yeah.
So it's been in the works for a long time. They've been trying. Like it's not even like it just was. They've literally been trying. Well, fuck. Dan Aykroyd's been trying like you wouldn't believe. It's the only thing he wants to talk about, that in his vodka. But it's something that was always continuously being shelved. To get a Ghostbusters 3 off the ground. And then it just kind of, it really did seem like it was just never going to happen for reasons which we'll jump in. So they're like, you know what, fuck it. We'll do it live. We're going to do it different.
Yeah. It really was one of those kind of like projects that was just, you constantly heard about, right? Like every few months there was something like, oh, maybe Bill Murray's getting closer. Maybe he's finally, coming on. Oh, maybe they're moving forward without him. I remember the whole period. It seemed like it lasted quite a bit where there was talk about Venkman being dead in Ghostbusters 3.
Yep.
And then there was like, well, but he might come in and at least do cameos as a ghost. And it just was really this thing that, as you said, Ghostbusters is a fascinating example of a franchise simply because that's definitely a film, the first one, that was just designed to be a one-off, but nobody watches that film and doesn't see the potential of a franchise. Right? I think it's interesting when you hear the filmmakers talk about like, well, yeah, we never really thought there'd be sequels, but I mean, it's such a sequel bait kind of film just as it exists, right?
See, and you know what? I'll push back on that a little bit. I've never really understood the Ghostbusters franchise for what it is or what it was trying to be.
I mean, I agree with you. Let me reiterate. My point is that not that well, I'm sure we're going to have a lot to say in a moment about what we think of the franchise.
Yeah.
But I mean, when you make a film about four guys who start a business as the Ghostbusters and the movie ends with them getting their first big success and kind of establishing themselves, all I'm saying is it's so clearly a potential setup for more.
Okay. Yeah. Okay.
That's not to say they should have done more or anything,
Yeah, no.
but you can see how any studio would look at the success of that film and be like, we gotta make more. And actually, even though this is like a whole other discussion we don't have time to get into, but Ghostbusters 2, if those of you are interested, if you look into even the story behind that was a film that had a really rocky road to get even made. Because obviously the studio wanted it to happen very quickly, and it took longer than they anticipated simply because of issues with Bill Murray not being excited about sequels, him kind of feuding with the studio, an inability to find the right script again. Because one thing that's also true of the first Ghostbusters, Ghostbusters 2, and then the eventual Ghostbusters 3 that never happened is you just mentioned how this is really Aykroyd's baby, that Ghostbusters is his passion project. But interestingly enough, kind of every iteration of it is much smaller in scale than what he intended it to be. He's got these kind of like very big ideas for Ghostbusters that never quite pan out. He always has to kind of come down to earth a little bit, literally, actually, with the first one.
Yeah.
So yeah, definitely Sony had been trying for a long time. And then you get to a modern era where just nostalgia is the name of the game, right? And I'm trying to think of the timeline of this because I don't know how much, maybe you remember, Chris, I don't know how much this might have actually influenced them finally getting to a point where like rushing into Ghostbusters. But I know not too long before this one really got going, there was like Stranger Things happened, right? And Stranger Things, like all this like 80s nostalgia became a really big thing again. And then they even had a part in, I believe it's season 2 of Stranger Things where they're wearing Ghostbusters Halloween costumes.
Yep.
And that got everybody excited, like, oh yeah, we love Ghostbusters. And I feel like that's when kind of this, am I wrong? Is that like timeline wise where this kind of started to actually come together a little bit?
You know what? Let me just check here. Stranger Things. When did that start? That started in 2016. So yeah, it was definitely in the chatter probably around Hollywood at least. If it came out in 2016, that means they were developing it in 2014. So right around the time. Right. So yeah, you're probably correct. Yeah.
So I'm just like, that just proves that like the nostalgia wave was riding hard. And that's what led Sony to this. Now, in terms of this iteration though, so they just gave up on 3. I think it all hinged on Bill Murray ultimately. It just became clear that he didn't want to do it. And also I do think Harold Ramis passing away kind of took the wind out of the sails of, well, we're never going to get the 4 guys back together again. And Bill Murray clearly is not that excited about it. So we have to do something else. And then I remember hearing all these different iterations. I remember hearing about talk of what comedic stars could be the next Ghostbusters. So why this version? Well, let's remember, this is coming not too long off of the success of Bridesmaids. And this is where I say you kind of get it, right? You kind of get why Sony thought this was like, yeah, this is like a surefire idea. Because people forget, I don't even know if people forget, but Bridesmaids was huge.
Yeah, it was gigantic.
Critically acclaimed, financially successful, big time, right? Oscar nominated. Everybody's kind of riding high off of that. So signing on Paul Feig to direct, he's an established comedic force at that point. And then bringing in, the 2 leading ladies of that movie, Melissa McCarthy and Kristen Wiig. I feel like at that point, Leslie Jones and Kate McKinnon were both just starting to get a lot of buzz on Saturday Night Live.
Yep, definitely.
So everything about it made sense to a certain degree. Would you agree?
Oh, absolutely. It was it was kind of that perfect storm of like, yeah, of course this'll happen. And especially when they decided to completely redo everything. Because like we said before, Ghostbusters 3 was in the makings forever. It was a ton of iterations. And then I guess this was interesting to hear because I know Bill Murray was the holdup for a long time, but I didn't realize until the research was that every one of the main actors, including Reitman, had a clause in their contract that they could veto the movie for whatever reason they wanted. They could just be like, fuck it. and it would be over.
I think it's like every original actor except for Ernie Hudson. the poor odd man out on the franchise.
Maybe that's why he seems so indifferent between every type of chatter with this movie coming out too.
I mean, I do feel bad for him if you look into his story, where he talks about how originally that role was much bigger in the first film, and then they drastically cut it down because they wanted to expand Bill Murray's part, and how then even he was supposed to be like bigger deal in the second one, and they just cut it down again.
Right.
And then there's that kind of sad thing where he still goes to conventions in his Ghostbusters costume.
Yeah.
And it's like, he has these mixed feelings about the franchise. He's, obviously he says he's proud of the film, but I know he's also frankly talked about how he's kind of hurt by his place in that franchise. But yeah, I thought that was interesting too, the fact that they could veto it.
Just very strange that anyone could just veto it for whatever reason. And I can't remember. I played the game. I played the Ghostbusters game, and I loved it. Did Ernie Hudson he had a big role in that too? Did you know? I don't know how much of that you were familiar with.
I never played the game. I know that the cast considers it like the actual third Ghostbusters film. I just read a little bit about it today in doing research for this episode. So I don't know. I'm not aware of like who had the big roles in that, or if all four of them were kind of equals.
Right.
But I do remember it came out, finding it funny that Bill Murray came back for that just after all his like kind of, always, resisting the idea. But then it's like, that's, doing voice work in a video game is not much of a time, suck for him or whatever.
And let's be honest, he basically does voice work in this new movie too. So
yeah, that's true. Yeah. And also like people forget that him and Harold Ramis were like not really on great terms anymore. They had a big falling out during Groundhog Day. So he wasn't really rushing to work with him again. I'm not even sure. Maybe they made up before Harold Ramis passed away. I hope they did.
I thought they did. I'm pretty sure. I remember that it was like something like honestly like near the end, like it was like maybe even comes down to like a hospital visit of some sort. Like honestly, but I do feel that it was mended.
I mean, I hope that's the case because it's such a bummer to think. And especially since it's so strange that the feud is over that film, which is, I almost think, inarguably Bill Murray's best movie.
Yeah, totally.
that he felt so upset during the making of it and they didn't get along. It's like, well, yeah, but look what you guys created together, But hey, that happens. But yeah, so I can't really, like, in a lot of ways, and I really can't fault Sony because we're in a moment we'll talk about, some of the poor decisions that followed. But ultimately, I don't know that their approach is that much different than I would have signed off on as a studio head, saying, okay, you want to get Ghostbusters going again? We have to start with a new cast. Let's get somebody who just helmed a very successful comedy. Let's get, obviously you're going to say, like, well, who are the big comedians of the moment? Well, these two are just proven box office-wise. Here are two rising stars. It seemed like, yeah, sure. I don't know on, like, just the level of, like, the initial construction. There's too much I can fault.
It's kind of like when we were talking about John Carter, was that like all of the ingredients seem right. I'm not mad at this. And that's why like when this was even being talked about, I was never against this idea. I was like, yeah, absolutely. Like Kristen Wiig, like I've had a crush on her forever. She's amazing. Like anything she does is hilarious. Throw her in there. They say Kate McKinnon. I'm like, oh my God, she's the best new cast member right now. And yeah, I was a huge Bridesmaids fan. So everything was, gravy.
Yeah. I mean, so obviously I'm sure some people are listening and saying, well, yeah, but guys, are you going to talk about like what happened next? And of course we're going to, and there are some elements of that worth talking about, even where we're just talking about the initial putting it together. There are some things then that start turning the tide a little bit with, Paul Feig talking about some of this stuff and some marketing decisions. We'll get into that, but I think ultimately, we're just both agreeing that the initial wave of decisions that led to this film seemed to make sense. So let's just kind of segue into the film itself and when it kind of was unleashed onto the world, and then we'll talk about what went wrong.
We have dedicated our whole lives to studying the paranormal. Now there's sightings all over the city. There are people out there that need our help. Holtzman, you're a brilliant engineer. Aaron, no one's better at quantum physics than you. We can provide a real service.
I'm joining the club. You guys are really smart about this science stuff, but I know New York. And I can borrow a car from my uncle.
You didn't disclose that the vehicle was going to be a hearse.
It's a Cadillac.
All right, here's the plot summary from IMDb. Following a ghost invasion of Manhattan, paranormal enthusiasts Aaron Gilbert and Abby Yates, nuclear engineer Gillian Holtzman, and a subway worker, Patty Tolan, band together to stop the otherworldly threat.
Succinct. Doesn't sound ultimately that much different than the original Ghostbusters.
No, and especially when you're going for a nice reboot of the thing and make a whole brand new, unique take.
Yeah.
That sounds pretty much exactly what the movie is. So
to address what went wrong, obviously this is a film where, talk about this film as kind of wading into a minefield in a little bit of a way. Because you just can't talk about it without talking about all the various controversy that's around this film at the time. And we have to address that. And I think it's a good place to start the discussion because in terms of like why this film failed, you can start to look at initially where the bad kind of mojo and press really started for it. And that ultimately comes down to also you could say it comes down to that first trailer they released. But even leading up to the trailer, I think, it's not like that trailer came out in a vacuum and people were just like, wow, that trailer's so bad. There was this initial wave of kind of anger about it. And this is where I suppose we can start talking about the Ghostbusters fandom in general, right? Which I know you have some things to say, and I think I do too. Because there's kind of two facets of it. So this first trailer debuts, and it instantly becomes one of the most disliked videos on YouTube ever. And I'm not saying that, vaguely or hypothetically. I'm talking the actual ratio of dislikes in the first day it debuted was like astronomical. People just shit all over this thing. And it really felt like this kind of almost organized campaign to take this down already. Right? And you're wondering, like, well, where did that come from? And already in the ether, bubbling up before the trailer debuted, was a lot of really ugly kind of talk about why is it for women and why is it a remake. Those are like kind of two separate elements, but both worth talking about. Yeah. I don't know where. So I don't know if you want to start with one of them or just talk about the fandom in general.
Well, yeah, I want to just jump on the fandom thing first. I don't understand Ghostbusters as a franchise. I don't understand the fandom in the slightest. I think the first movie is wonderful. It's an incredible comedy, and it is so fun, and it's got great characters. I can't talk enough about the first movie. So, and we all know how good the first one is. So, I digress.
It's okay.
The one
I'm kidding. It's great.
Yeah. But the one thing I never felt walking out of that first one, and let's be honest, when I watched the first one, I was a kid, but watching it as an adult, when it's over, I'm not like, okay, I really want to revisit this world. I want to go back to grungy New York and see a bunch of pest control guys go around and do their job. I like the characters. I like that. I just don't understand this idea of them being action heroes, being role models. I don't really get that. I mean, Bill Murray's a sleazeball in that first movie. He's not a good guy at all. I don't see how Ghostbusters created conventions. I just don't. And I mean, if you're listening to this and you're one of them, that's great. And I applaud it, and that's fine. You like what you like. I would never talk shit about it. But I guess I just don't understand it. Do you understand it? I don't get it. I don't see why this is like a Star Wars for people. I don't see why people went crazy on Stranger Things when the ad, like you mentioned Stranger Things, and the ad campaign was like, oh my God, they're wearing Ghostbusters costumes. I was like, who gives a fuck? Like,
not only do I not understand it, I didn't even know it was a thing until the reaction to this film. Yeah. I'm guessing maybe that's where you fall too, right? Because that's when we had that like what was that documentary called? It was all about Ghostbuster fandom.
Oh yeah.
That was like such this like fluff piece made by some Ghostbuster fans, but really did show like the intensity of this fandom. And it's strange because when you grow up, obviously, Star Wars is a fandom. Comic books have a fandom. Star Trek is, super intense with the Trekkies or Trekkers, whatever. But I didn't know that existed for Ghostbusters. Now, I think I maybe understand the enjoyment of the world a little bit more. I do remember as a kid being somewhat excited for Ghostbusters 2. But at the same time, I also remember seeing it, and even as a kid being like, well, that was good. Because when you're a kid, you think everything's good.
Yeah, of course.
But like any kid also, and everybody in America, 1 week later, Batman came out, and I no longer cared about Ghostbusters 2.
Yeah.
And that's ultimately like a big factor into why that was one of the main reasons Ghostbuster 2 failed, as also it just wasn't that good of a movie. Right? And that's kind of apparent to me because I think I enjoyed it as a kid, but I don't remember there ever being any period after that where I was sitting around saying, oh man, when are they going to do a third one? I can't wait to see another one. I felt like I had my fill. I did like the cartoon.
Yep.
I've since gone back and like revisited some of the cartoon. I still think it's pretty cool. I think it's really cool that the cartoon managed to build on some of the initial ideas of the first film and actually bring in a lot of Lovecraftian ideas. To have like Lovecraft stuff in a Saturday morning cartoon is pretty cool. They actually created a lot of cool ghosts and monsters in that show. I actually think other than the first film, of course, I feel like the fandom is mostly built out of the cartoon because in an odd way, if you're just talking about it as a franchise, that's where the most success is almost, besides the first film. The cartoon had toys, video games, comic books spun off from it. And I feel like that's where everyone's fandom comes from. But that's an odd thing to have such an intense fandom about. And then when this film came out and everyone kind of got up in arms with this idea that I can't believe they're remaking Ghostbusters. That's our life. How dare they? And then like James Rolfe, who I'm somewhat of a fan of. I really like Angry Video Game Nerd, that character in particular. I remember him putting out that video where he talked about how he refused to see the new one simply because it's a remake that's not acknowledging the events of the previous film.
Right.
And I was just so flabbergasted by that because at that point we were years into the remake train in Hollywood. And you always get people who are complaining about remakes, but I'd never seen like the level of vitriol that this film was getting about how dare they do this instead of Ghostbusters 3. I just feel like everyone kind of accepted, guys, this cast doesn't want to do it, or at least your favorite member of the cast doesn't want to do it. Move on. If you want more Ghostbusters, this is what you need to accept as a new cast.
And this cast is just schlubby and old, and I mean, I don't know what they wanted. Like, The Force Awakens comes out, and at least, Harrison Ford is, Harrison Ford, so you want to see him back and this and that, right? And again, you get the cast of characters, you get the Chewbacca back. Okay, that's fine. Mm-hmm. But you really want, how old is Dan Aykroyd? I don't want to age shame or anything like that, but it's like, bro, we're so far past Ghostbusters 1, and there's really nothing in between except for, like you said, the cartoon that ran. But other than that, it's all just been Dan Aykroyd in interviews wanting to make this movie. That's the only thing that's kept this alive.
Yeah, it's like, I feel like whenever people are so upset about it, they kind of, like you said, they are like, I can't believe we're not getting a third one. That's not to say there couldn't be a funny third one about them being old and, kind of even more broken down. Mm-hmm. But this idea that, of course, this is the direction they should have gone, I feel like people are overlooking and forgetting about Ghostbusters 2, which is understandable because, guys, the sequel's not good.
No, it's not good at all.
Yeah, it's just this like kind of way less funny retread of the first film. And I don't know that I believe that a third Ghostbusters film from the same creative team with the same cast would have been that much of an improvement. Maybe they would have put a little bit more effort into it because they learned their lessons from the second one. But also you see things like Ivan Reitman talk about how he thinks the second one's a better film than the first one. And then you just get like a little worried about, well, okay, I don't know. Like maybe these aren't the people to keep going with this.
Well, and jumping off that, I really don't want to shit on Dan Aykroyd, but Buddy's on a mission for years and years and years. And he just seems so misguided. It seems like he's leading the charge, right? And like you're talking about the same creative team. Well, Dan Aykroyd seems to be dragging this fucking thing down. His ideas are off the map. They're just can't be done. You said that he wanted to bring them to space, right? At one point.
The first film, his initial idea for the first Ghostbusters, his original concept was Ghostbusters in space. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Why? And it was Reitman who had to tell him, no, this will work more if they're just like schlubby New York guys. Yeah. The only thing I can say that's fair to like Dan Aykroyd is whenever you read about this, it always says that every time someone talks like sense into him, he's very open to it. Sure. He doesn't put up a fight. He always goes, okay, yeah, I get why that's the better decision. But you're right. He always starts from a place of just crazy ideas. I mean, his idea for the third Ghostbusters film was Ghostbusters in Hell. Yeah.
Was it called Ghostbusters Hellbent or Hellbent?
It was called both Hellbent, and then there was a period where I think it was just called Ghostbusters in Hell. And I just don't know that that's going to work as, a family comedy.
I specifically liked the hellish version of Manhattan known as Manhattan. That was my favorite part. But yeah, no, he's just leading the charge in a weird way, especially when he brings up Ghost Corps. This movie's being put together, and all of a sudden, Columbia Pictures is going to create a subsidiary company called Ghost Corps to manage merch and TV shows and this new 2016 movie, and then all the sequels going forward, presumably that would have happened.
Not just sequels. Like, this is where they're already getting to their eyes are bigger than their stomach, right? At this point, because they're already thinking about a Ghostbusters cinematic universe.
Yeah, and it's like, guys, you have one great movie. Mm-hmm. That's it. And I know you talk about the cartoon, but come on. And I used to watch the cartoon too, but it's like it's just this whole idea of Ghostbusters was one great movie, and Dan Aykroyd kind of going off the deep end in a weird way. And honestly, he really is. You listen to him talk, and all he wants to talk about is Ghostbusters, aliens, and his vodka. Mm-hmm. So
yeah, he's an interesting guy. I mean, if you look into his history, it's understandable, because his dad wrote a kind of famous book about ghosts. I believe his grandfather was a famous spiritualist. His mom claimed to see ghosts. That's what I kind of like about Dan Aykroyd in a way. Like, I kind of like that he's crazy, but at the same time, I also agree that that's not maybe the guy you want in charge of your big multi-million-dollar franchise.
Yeah, totally. Like, I'd like to maybe hang out with Dan Aykroyd. I don't know if I'd give him $200 million to do whatever he wants. Mm-hmm. You know, but and I, as a fellow Canadian, big fan, Dan, if you're listening, just don't send mean tweets to us, please. That's all I care about.
Yeah. So there's that element of it. So I never like that element of just like, well, I can't believe they're doing a reboot. I really can't get behind that. I never had any issue with them rebooting the franchise. It seemed to be a decision that made sense.
Yeah.
The far uglier part of it, we really don't understand. And this is like the unfortunate aspect you just have to talk about this film is, man, there was just like such an ugly kind of side of the discourse around this film, where people really went after it just for being for female leads. There was the awfulness with the racism directed towards Leslie Jones, and just like everything. And I think it's strange because I go back and I look at it, and I kind of think Paul Feig didn't do himself many favors, but I feel like sometimes in his responses to it, he fanned the flames a little bit.
Absolutely he did.
Yeah, because it's strange because we're going to talk about what we feel about the film in a few minutes, but I ultimately don't think the film is making any kind of big gender statements. In fact, that's one compliment I'll give the film. They never make it about, it's a big deal that women are Ghostbusters. They just present them as 4 capable women who could be Ghostbusters.
Hold on, though. They do until the presumptive reshoots, where there's a lot of ADR. Yes. There's a lot of things added later that seem to be a response to the online discourse, which I think which I agree, it does the film a disservice.
Yes, and then he would kind of like fan the flames by talking about it in that way, and it's like, man, it's just like the Star Wars thing, right? That is such a small part. It's unfortunate that you even feel like you have to address idiots like that.
Yeah, I agree.
And I think sometimes the way him and the studio can respond to it created this awful kind of gender war around it. And I think really most people were, I would say probably more people were just like, no, I whatever. I'll watch a funny film with 4 women. I mean, obviously, like Bridesmaids had just been a hit. I can't believe for a moment that people are just like, well, yeah, Bridesmaids is okay, but we just can't allow women to be Ghostbusters. It's more that these assholes created this movement. You know, that's just like what they do, right? They like to create this kind of like fake outrage against a film, and then everything feeds into it, and it becomes this huge mess.
Well, and it's not just that Bridesmaids was a huge hit; it's the same fucking cast. Mm-hmm. So it makes even less sense why the filmmakers gave so much. I guess they gave them so much power to the online community, and by addressing it, if they just didn't, and part of me feels like they just shouldn't addressed it. Like even Paul Feig making sure to go on Twitter to say it will absolutely be hilarious women, and that's who I'm gonna call, and fuck you guys, and all this other stuff. You're just feeding that flame. You're just it's this weird Twitter. Me personally, I got off Twitter a couple of years ago. And it just was becoming this crazy negativity. Nobody's ever correct. And it's just, you fight fire with fire all the time. And that's what it felt that Paul Feig, I know, had the best intentions. This isn't a knock on him as a guy. Like, he's defending his movie. He's defending his cast. Like, absolutely, I get it. But that's not what you do on Twitter. You're not going to convince anybody on Twitter that you're right, and especially these morons. So they were kind of damned if they do, damned if they don't. They probably would have been smarter if they didn't. In a weird way, you know? Like, would you agree with that, or am I just being obtuse? I don't know.
No, I do agree, because like then the real problem becomes as that snowball kept rolling down the hill and becoming, you know, bigger and bigger, you create this just overall terrible discourse around the film, where this goes back to, I brought up the James Rolfe video, where if you watch that video, his whole point was that he was more on the other stupid argument where he said, like, I don't want to see it because it's not a sequel. Okay, right. I already said that's dumb, right? I just don't, like, whatever. Like, I overall thought his take was misguided there. But then you had all these people saying, well, yeah, but he's clearly misogynist, right? It's that he doesn't like it because it's just women. And that becomes the easy go-to catch. And I feel like that's where I saw Paul Feig slipping into that as well. Yeah. Sometimes. Now, to be fair, I've also seen comments from him where he said, like, well, no, I'm aware some people are just worried about the franchise, and I get that. But at the time, I felt like there was this kind of, well, if you're not excited for this film or you're going to criticize the film, it's just because you hate women. And it's just like, so now you're creating a film that nobody can just have a normal conversation about. And it's just, if they had just ignored all that crap from the beginning and just said, look, it's Ghostbusters. It's for funny women. Because you know what sucks is I remember me falling into the trap of it even, because it was unavoidable. And I remember there being a period where even I caught myself thinking, man, maybe they should have just done like 2 women and 2 men. And then I remember thinking, like, wait, why am I thinking that? Like, no, they have every right to do it the way they are doing it. There's no reason they should capitulate to that. Yeah. But it was just like trying to see like what would have saved them a little bit maybe. And ultimately, you're right. I think maybe what would have saved them is just ignoring it. Just saying like, okay, there's always going to be idiots like that, but we're just going to try to make the funniest film possible. And as you said, not reshoot stuff to address it in the film.
Yeah, just prove them wrong. But in doing these reshoots and adding this ADR shit, you're proving them right in a weird way. Like a bad right, obviously. I don't agree with it, but these people get off on it. It's the same thing that happened with The Last Jedi. Fucking 1 year later, that movie got such a vile hatred, and then all of a sudden, guess what? The studio course corrects with Rise of Skywalker. That's not what we want. Same goes for Justice League right now. We live in a time right now that Justice League is being remade, redone, re-edited, whatever the fuck into a 4-hour TV show. Like, what is going on? And it really did start with this movie. I can't... Is there a time before this that it was this vile to make things change so quickly on a dime, to reinvent the property that it's even... talking about, like, was this was really the first, right?
This was definitely where I first became aware of this kind of changing tide in Hollywood of fandom being this kind of toxic, and that's what I mean. This is why I was even more kind of bowled over by this fandom I didn't even know existed, and then just being like, wow, is it really this gross? And again, it's just like Star Wars, where I don't even think it necessarily is. I think it's a small band of weirdos who infiltrate it, act like they're part of the fandom, or maybe are, but clearly aren't the majority of it. But yeah, this was before we knew how bad Star Wars would get, in a couple of years. And I just remember thinking this time, like, wow, Ghostbusters fandom is the worst fandom. Now it's like, I don't even know if it's in the top 10 anymore, because everything has just gone to crap since this. But
it's funny, you say Ghostbusters is the worst fandom, and I'm like, Ghostbusters has a fandom? Like, you just put this huge spotlight that if it was going to be this bad for this property, what the fuck is it going to be for later? And you're so right. It just ballooned into something crazy. And the internet is just an absolute dumpster fire. Welcome. Thank you for listening to Failure to Franchise. I'm excited that you're joining us for our internet show. But here we go.
Yeah. Meanwhile, please sign our petition to have Disney animate Colin Trevorrow's Duel of the Fates script.
Yeah, that'd be great. That'd be excellent.
So we can be hypocrites too, but don't worry about it. Yeah, I don't know. And you said something earlier that I think moves us into our next topic of conversation, though, because ultimately, you're right. When you said all you have to do is prove them wrong. And that's the thing. Like, all this stuff about the trailer getting voted down, the overall vitriol about it being a remake or a reboot and not a continuation, right? The sexist crap. All of this wouldn't have mattered if the film was just great. Yeah. And that would have been the ultimate victory. But unfortunately, the other factor of what went wrong is the film itself, I think. Yeah. I mean, I don't know. You and I have not specifically talked. I had a pretty good sense of how you felt about it, because I remember us just talking about the film in passing through the years, but we did our usual thing of rewatching it both and not talking to each other about it. But this is my first time revisiting it since the theater. And I didn't really enjoy it in the theater, and I didn't walk away from it that impressed the second time either.
No, I was disappointed is not the right word. It's I think my thoughts were just proven. Speaking about proven right, I was proven right in my original take on the movie. It has no idea what it wants to be. It has no vision. It has no clear sense of anything. It's not its own thing in the slightest. Is it a sequel? Is it a remake? Is it a reboot? It's all of the above and everything in between. It's just misguided was the biggest word. I think I wrote that down so many times that it just did not know what the fuck it was doing. And nobody seemed to know. The job of the director is to rein everybody in, is to make the movie, is to set the clear vision to everybody that we're all on the same path. But it really did feel like the cast got away from him. And that's no disrespect to the cast, because I think the cast is great. I like all these people, some more than others. But it felt like, what is it, when the inmates are running the asylum?
Yeah.
We had this discussion a little while ago. Not really a discussion, but in passing about Apatow films. Okay? Mm-hmm. And I like Judd Apatow. And I love his style of comedy, and I love what he's done for comedy. He's got this improv style where he sets the camera up and lets them riff, and his movies are super long. And I get that. And a lot of them work, a lot of them don't work.
Yeah, and in fact, like when that first broke, right, with 40-Year-Old Virgin and things like Superbad and Forgetting Sarah Marshall, that style was such a breath of fresh air at the time. Because we were coming off of years of the dumb kind of American Pie, Tomcats mold.
Sex comedies.
And not that like the Apatow films are kind of raunchy, but in a different way. And like I said, he would just get these really funny people and just let them go. And it was like, yeah, this is great.
And I love all that. I just recently rewatched, not rewatched, I just finally watched the Larry Sanders Show. And I've done a deep dive on Gary Shandling's career. And it does feel like a lot of that stems from him. That was his mentor. So I get it. And I respect it. I love Judd Apatow. But, boy, is this it's an issue when movies that people that aren't as well equipped as Judd Apatow are handle this type of thing, and it needs to be a certain genre, not a science fiction comedy.
This is ultimately the problem. So this is where it falls apart, because I think you mentioned how the film doesn't know what it is.
Yeah.
And then to go back to your earlier point about why is this even a franchise, ultimately the biggest problem with Ghostbusters, and this is what I remember realizing while I was watching it in the theater, like thinking like, this is not good. What's not working? It's just going, oh, they don't understand what Ghostbusters is.
No.
That's ultimately the problem. Is this was an attempt to make Ghostbusters in the same fashion as what was the kind of popular comedy at the time. And that's not the right approach, because as you just said, the Apatow formula works in relationship comedies or just, everyday life comedies, because that's when you can just let people riff and say, hey, the movie is just a series of people hanging out and talking. The problem with Ghostbusters is it never can form any kind of momentum in terms of the story you want to see about these people busting ghosts, because it has to keep grinding to a halt for dumb, off-topic improvisational comedy bits that have nothing to do with Ghostbusters. I remember watching it last night and getting to the scene where Melissa McCarthy and Leslie Jones go on an extended riff about how Kristen Wiig's boyfriend must dance. Yep. Because he's like this kind of uptight, snooty guy. And that was the point where it's just like, this scene right here represents everything bad about this film. Why is this in Ghostbusters? I want to see them fighting ghosts. Why am I watching them talk for 5 minutes about how this guy dances?
It was that scene. I think that really did seem like it is the moment where everybody kind of breaks. Because I wrote that down too. That was the moment that I was like, you know what, this movie is just dog shit. And it's because it's mind-numbingly rambling. That's it. It's mind-numbing rambling for every single one of the jokes.
Yeah,
there's
every
nothing
scene
happening.
is like that. And every scene, it never slows down. It's just constant riffing.
Yeah.
Yep.
And
never on topic.
Never. Okay. Yeah. There's one thing to be improvising about something, but to go off on all the movie references. The Patrick Swayze thing was insane. There's a moment for people that didn't rewatch. There's a moment where they talk and Patrick Swayze comes up because they're talking about ghosts, and then the officer says, "Oh, like Ghost, like that Patrick Swayze movie," and then Kristen Wiig starts to riff on Patrick Swayze movies, and then Melissa McCarthy comes out and goes, "Hey, it's about Roadhouse," and then they start talking about Patrick Swayze, and it's like, what is going on? What am I watching? Like I'm frustrated right now reliving this in my mind.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's coming through.
And that's the thing is like this approach can't work in a high concept comedy because you can't riff about science and ghosts because guess what the actors aren't really? Scientists. And I'm not saying that as an insult, they're just not. So they're not going to be riffing clever science jokes. And if people are thinking, well, yeah, but the first movie's not full of clever science jokes, go back and notice how all the humor though derives from either them being kind of bad businessmen or being like, schlubby exterminators that are trying to take out ghosts. That's where the humor comes from. It's not about them talking about pop culture references and recent movies and how characters dance. Like, what does this have to do with anything?
Egon is yells out a bunch of science stuff, but that's never the joke. The joke is Bill Murray's reaction to it, or the moments of silence when they're just like, huh? Or they're testing things out and it's just, there's this silence. See, this is one thing about comedy. It's more about the silence. It's the break. This movie, they just won't stop talking. And it was just, there's no brevity at all for you to sit with that joke. The best joke in the movie, and I wrote this down when it happened, was there's this joke where they go visit this mansion or this museum thing, right? And they go, "Oh, Ed was talking to me," and then the guy, what's his name, Zach Woods, goes, "Oh, Ed's been dead for 15 years," and I'm like, that's a fucking good joke, but they won't stop talking. Because Ed is actually alive, and he shows up, and he's like, "Oh no, this is Ed's son. This is Ed Jr." And then they just riff, and they just go, and then go, and go, and go, and they start making poop jokes.
Yep.
And that's the movie.
Yeah.
And it doesn't end. It like we did our little riff about wonton soup in the beginning of this episode, and we're not lying when that joke comes out. What, 6, 7, maybe even 8 times? It's
a runner, and that's what I mean. Like, why? Who sits there and goes, "You know what? I would love to see in a Ghostbusters film, a running joke about Melissa McCarthy not getting enough wontons in her soup." That's the kind of joke you put in just a regular comedy that's about nothing. If there's a running joke in Ghostbusters, I want it to be a joke about ghostbusting, about the actual sci-fi elements of the film, which, not to say this movie doesn't have that stuff, and I think the film kind of occasionally comes to life when it actually gets into the ghostbusting elements of it. But anytime you start to get excited about that, never mind, because now we're going to go on another extended riff about nothing that has to do with the plot.
Can I say something that I do really like?
Yeah, there's a couple things I really like.
Yeah, I love the look of the ghosts.
They're great.
I think they're fucking awesome. I love the integration of the slime. I love they are genuinely frightening to look at. The neon lights, everything, and it's the set is done practically too. So the actors that are there in place of the CGI ghosts are wearing neon lights on their body. So it's just illuminating the screen, and it's just awesome. Like, I will say though, you just said they're genuinely frightening to look at, which I agree, but they're never presented as genuinely frightening. And that's kind of a mark against it too, because I remember being a kid and finding the library ghosts at the beginning of Ghostbusters genuinely scary. And the demon dogs are genuinely intimidating, right? They're presented as an actual threat. Absolutely.
And no ghosts are in this. There's never a moment where you actually feel any tension or fear. And again, that's because the movie can't let anything go by without being, riff, riff, riff. Even moments like that.
It's funny you say that because, now thinking back, even when Leslie Jones is, she's kind of the every person, right, in the movie, and sees a ghost for the first time, and she's not, like, why isn't she losing her absolute goddamn mind? Yeah. Things like that need to happen. I know our main characters believe in ghosts, but still, in the first movie, Dan Aykroyd was genuinely, he gets scared, right? Like, he gets scared of that movie, correct?
They all get scared from the library ghosts at the beginning.
Yeah, and he's believed in ghosts his whole life, his character as well. But it's that's something that our main characters never do. You're so right. I didn't even really think about that they're never frightened of anything they're seeing.
Well, this is where we get into other problems with the film besides, and I will have a couple nice things to say too, but ultimately beyond the, because you talked earlier about Paul Feig losing control of this film.
Yeah.
And I don't know, I'm not even sure if it's a matter of losing control or him having the wrong idea from the outset. I think because this approach worked in Bridesmaids, I think they went into this film thinking, okay, we'll do that again, right? We'll do the riffing thing. And that's a misunderstanding from the very base level of what this film should be.
Right.
You're right. Maybe a better actor would have started to rein it, or maybe a better director, would have started to rein it in, which he did not do. Beyond that, on just a structure level, I mean, obviously this film is basically just remaking the first one, right? Now, first of all, let's get into, okay, so even though I said I don't agree with the people who were mad about it being a remake instead of a sequel, this film kind of does consistently undercut itself by doing so many references to the first movie, to the point where it makes you wonder, why isn't it a continuation?
But Trev, it's not even making references to it. It is carbon copying things. It is it is the firehouse. It is the logo. It's the Ecto One.
Well, and that's the thing. If they were like proud of it being a remake, I'd almost like forgive that. But what I ultimately come down to is when Paul Feig talked about why he wanted to do a reboot, where he said he had this idea, and this is where we get into again him saying things that these like gender idiots were able to latch onto. Where he said, well, if I make it like a sequel, then it's just 4 women who are continuing the work that these guys started. If I do a reboot, it's about 4 women who create the Ghostbusters. Now, I get where he's coming from on that.
Sure.
But the movie kind of undercuts that by giving us a villain who's a man who is also creating the same technology at the same time.
Yeah.
and first of all, and I know they kind of like get away with it by saying, oh, it's because he read their book or whatever. But whatever, it's still, that's weird. I think it's weird that the first Ghostbusters movie in your new universe has a human villain who's like unleashing ghosts, and we never really find out why. His plan makes no sense. No. Why he becomes super powerful when he dies is never explained. You know, say what you will about Aykroyd's craziness, but the rules and there was exposition in Ghostbusters which explained what Gozer was trying to do. Yeah. You understood what was happening. This film never does any of that. Even the character arcs aren't right in this. And I'll give you an example. So in the final battle, there's a scene where Melissa McCarthy's character. So let me back up a little bit, just in case anyone hasn't seen it. I don't know why they'd be listening to us talk this much about it if you haven't seen it. Yeah. But the initial character arcs that you think are going to play out is that Kristen Wiig and Melissa McCarthy's characters were friends when they were young. And Kristen Wiig had this like ghost that consistently kind of haunted her in her bed when she was a little girl. And nobody believed her except for Melissa McCarthy. So they grew up and they wrote this book about actual ghosts. But then Kristen Wiig wanted to go work at this prestigious university. She wanted to get tenure. So she distanced herself from Melissa McCarthy. But kind of betrayed her, right? Left her behind. Mm-hmm. And now she's up for tenure and Melissa McCarthy makes the book public again, puts it out for sale. And this makes Kristen Wiig mad. She goes and confronts her, and that's like the first 10 minutes of the film. But then right away they both see a ghost. She gets fired from her job because she's on YouTube saying ghosts are real. And that's kind of where the arc ends, because they instantly kind of make up and become Ghostbusters. Then flash forward to the final battle, and there's a moment where Melissa McCarthy's pulled into this portal, and she's like basically being pulled down to hell. And Kristen Wiig jumps in after her, tying like this like cord around her. Goes down this like, cool special effect moment where she's floating down, grabs her, and says, "I won't leave you again." Okay, I get that you think that's a character arc. The problem is that's not an issue anymore. No. You solved that an hour and a half ago. That's done. We know you're not going to leave. You guys are a team.
Yeah, you guys are best friends.
Yeah, what are you talking about? You've totally botched that. That would have worked better. Chris, you would have hated me. This was the whole movie I was watching, I was like rewriting it in my head. But this is a movie that clearly would have worked better if Kristen Wiig's character was always nebulous about this throughout the whole film. And like, that's the character arc, right?
Yeah, it is it's a jumbled mess. They don't know what they're doing.
And even just on logic, like if I was one of these like ghost bros that's obsessed with this universe, I'm sure I'd be even more flummoxed by the fact that they're the Ghostbusters, right? And there's only one scene where they trap a ghost. Otherwise, they're just like destroying the ghosts. They actually create different devices that grind the ghosts up and like spray them around. And I'm like, what are they doing? Aren't those human souls? Are you just murdering them? Like, what's happening?
I wrote that down, that they're okay. You're on the topic of the finale, okay? And like we said before, if you're listening to this now, it's because you are giving us a click that we so desperately need. But
I hope you're going to talk about the moment that made me throw up my hands in the theater and just give up. But
oh, interesting. Okay. Well, I was gonna talk, well, maybe not vaguely, but just, remember when I said earlier in this conversation that I've never understood the idea that these schlubby guys, these exterminators, are action heroes?
yeah.
And the whole movie, they're testing out new equipment, right? And all of a sudden you realize, oh, are those pistols? Okay, all right, okay. So now they got pistols, they got shotguns now, and they have bombs to trap ghosts. So anyway, the action movie, the entire finale becomes a full-on slow-mo action film. It makes zero sense.
Yeah.
Did anyone ever see the Ghostbusters as a spectacle-filled action movie? I doubt it. Not even these Ghost Bros. Come on, they punched ghosts in the face. Okay, bombs, dual-wielding pistols, slow-mo explosions. And like you said, they're killing ghosts? Hold on. What's going on here?
Well, none of that. The moment I was talking about is we talk about a film that has no sense of internal logic or
Right.
explaining its rules. There is a moment where Kristen Wiig kills a ghost with a knife. You know what I'm talking about. There's the Stay Puft Marshmallow Man ghost, which of course is a reference to the first film.
Of course.
And she stabs it with a regular knife, a Swiss Army knife, and it dies.
Unreal.
And I remember in the theater being like, wait, what? Are you going to explain that? Are you going to, like, if you can stab a ghost with a knife, why do we need the Ghostbusters? And that comes back to, too, is ultimately, like we said, with the Gozer in the original film, Gozer and Zool, you really understood, like, the threat of what was happening.
Yep.
And in this, because the ghosts never do anything bad to anyone, really, like Bill Murray's dumb cameo character gets killed, but almost more like by happenstance. Mm-hmm. When at the end, when Rowan, the villain, unleashes the ghosts on New York, I'm not even sure like why I should be worried about that, because they don't seem like they're looking to hurt anybody.
No, they're kind of just chilling. Like there's actually a scene of a ghost at a bar.
And there's like stuff like that in the first film too, but you really understood the threat of Zool. Rowan, I guess they insinuate that he's going to be this like evil force, but what does he do? He makes the military and the cops dance. And then there's like a really strange moment where he turns Times Square into the Times Square of the 70s for no reason. He just goes like, enjoy a blast from the past in New York. And they're like, oh, what does this mean? Nothing. It's just like Paul Feig wanted to see old Times Square. I don't get it. Like even the ghosts that show up at that point aren't 70s ghosts. They're like pilgrims and pirates. You're like, wait, what is that? I don't know.
The entire finale is just makes no sense. You mentioned you kind of jumped over the dance scene. A remarkable scene.
Yeah.
That, like you said, the main plot, the main villains, the height of his power, he makes the military do like a line dance. Very strange. You get an excuse.
It also begs the question of if he can control people's minds, why does he just never do that to the Ghostbusters?
Another good call.
Mm-hmm.
This is the thing about when you make. I don't know if I've mentioned this in the last in the one episode we did or just in passing, but when you make sci-fi or fantasy or whatever you're doing and you're creating a world, okay, you need to create the rules. Like you said, Kristen Wiig kills the ghost with a knife. The Rowan never mind controls the Ghostbusters.
Yeah, like you brought up the ghost grenades. They never tell us what that actually means for the ghost.
Yeah, no idea. It even says like when they're testing it, they throw it. They're like, oh, it only harms the ghost, but then it explodes the alley. So you're like, well, okay, so it might kill them too. Like, what's going on? See, and I learned this. I didn't learn this, but I remember Joss Whedon talking about the Avengers years and years ago, and how difficult that movie is. And he said it's difficult because everybody has a different rule structure. Every one of your characters have different powers, different weaknesses. So when I remember his quote, I'm going to bungle Joss Whedon's quote, obviously. He said, when the Hulk gets shot, it doesn't matter. It bounces off of him. He gets angrier. It adds to his character. But you need to know if Captain America gets shot, he might die. Mm-hmm. And there's something in this movie that just it's completely. It's not interested in building that world. It's not interested at all, or they just honestly just didn't even think about it. Maybe it's that. Maybe they just didn't fucking think about it. Like, because it does seem like they're just that stupid putting this movie together. I don't know.
I think ultimately they were lazy and they didn't even want to deal with those questions.
Yeah, fuck it, right?
Yeah, that's it. They honestly had an attitude of, this is a ha-ha funny movie. It's going to be about our cast riffing, so we don't need to put any work into coming up with the rules of this world. But that's ultimately, like, when we're talking about why this movie failed, you create a film that's like so disappointing for the fans and also doesn't create a universe that feels like it can necessitate an expanded, cinematic universe. Because you haven't established a universe where that works. You haven't established rules and anything that we're excited to see any continuation of.
Yeah, like, am I looking for, like, what's next? Are they gonna have tanks? Like, are they gonna just like go into other cities now and just shoot them all up? Like, it doesn't make any sense why the ghosts are here, what they're doing, what the motivations are, why we're even busting them in the fucking first place. You said, yeah, you're right. It's just an excuse to have a comedy with a bunch of actors just riff, with a fundamental misunderstanding of the original property, but yet always fucking reminding you that there's a better movie out there.
Yeah, to the point of actually having the villain take the form of the logo from the original film. In maybe the most cringy moment, right? When he first appears as like the 2D animation version of it. Oh, good lord.
Once again, welcome to Failure to Franchise.
Even the characters, can we let's briefly talk about this? And
sure.
Maybe this is where we'll get into like the things we kind of like. Because again, it's not even like, this is a failure of everyone in terms of not knowing what kind of film they're making. But it's not necessarily a failure of unfunny people, because clearly they are funny.
Yeah.
But also, I remember like the breakout character of this film being Holtzman. People just loving Kate McKinnon's character. And I don't know how you feel about this, but I kind of don't even get that.
No.
Because she's just doing the standard I'm wacky kind of thing, which I know Kate McKinnon can do more than that. And also, Holtzman's never explained to us in a way where we even understand why she's like that. And really, she just kind of comes across as grating and annoying to me. Well,
she's not a real person.
Yeah.
She doesn't, like, again, it doesn't understand the movie that it's in. Ghostbusters was grounded. It sounds that sounds silly to say about a movie about ghosts, but it was grounded in reality, and that was the fun of it. In this movie, I mean, Kristen Wiig and Melissa McCarthy to a point are grounded for sure. Like, I think they're just off on the way, the silly talk way too much. But Holtzman genuinely doesn't feel like a real person, like in any respect.
Yeah.
I don't know why they're friends with. I don't know why they're friends with her. She's just annoying. She adds nothing. She actively fucks up the missions. Like, she's an obstacle at times. Yeah. She's just when they're facing something life threatening, Holtzman is making a joke about it, but kind of. I know the original they made jokes about stuff that was going on too, but she just has no urgency to solve the problem whatsoever. She's just there to riff. More so than the rest. And honestly, okay, I'm not a Leslie Jones fan.
Oh,
okay. Hold on, everybody. Hold on.
No. Because this is where I need to come in, because I think I know where you're going. And let me say, because I told you before we recorded that I have a hot take.
Okay.
And here's my hot take. And maybe it's possible you agree.
All right.
Of the 4 Ghostbusters in this, the best character by far, Patty.
Unbelievable.
Leslie Jones.
Yeah, I'm with you. I'm completely with you. Leslie Jones, I think, is one of the worst cast members on SNL that has ever been on that show.
I'm not a fan either. And the thing is, I don't even think it's that we don't think she's funny. It's that I tend to hate whenever, and this is like my problem with Pete Davidson too.
Same.
I don't like when they have cast members that they just keep bringing on Weekend Update to be themselves and do like, here's what Leslie Jones has to say this week. It's like, what? Like, I want character. Like,
yeah, totally.
Yeah.
But yeah, you can't shit on her in this movie. She's great. She's the best character. She has an actual sort of an arc, the closest thing to it. She's the most reasonable. She's the least outrageous.
I even love, like, in terms of like the one, like, I'll give credit where credit's due. I even love, if you were going to expand this world or like try to sell them as a team and an idea of like why they would work together. I love the idea that her whole thing is she knows everything about New York. That's a great character detail, because she's allowed to present exposition. It gives her like a value to the team. She's obviously like, because she's kind of like, she's the Winston Zedmore of this, right? She's the regular person who's hired on, who has no science background. But unlike Winston Zedmore, they give her an actual benefit that really works to the team's advantage. And I think it's a great move. And you mentioned the scene earlier where she first sees a ghost. She has like the moment when she's backstage at the concert. I actually really like that moment where she's talking to herself, and she's kind of talking what the audience would expect, like where she's saying, like, why did I quit my better job for this? What am I doing? You know?
And we said that none of the cast members, I'm going to correct myself now. I said none of the cast members seem scared. She's the only one that seems genuinely scared later on. Especially in that concert scene with the mannequin. Like, I love the mannequin effect. I loved all that stuff. That felt classic Ghostbusters. Yep. She was genuinely... Sorry.
So to like expand my hot take, I was going to say, like, watching this film, I started to have this feeling like she should have been the main character. This is the lesson they should have learned from the first one, with the way, like, you know, Ernie Hudson has often talked about how Winston was like used poorly.
Yep.
This is the key: is you make the main character, you make the Ghostbusters a team that already exists, and you make the Patty character our audience identifier.
Yep.
The regular person who's swept up into this world and does not understand what these scientists are talking about, is really scared of all this stuff. If she was the crucial focal point of this, it would have worked so much better.
Absolutely. This is what I love about our little show here. I love that we don't discuss this stuff before. So I love that we came to that same conclusion right here on the podcast. I want to throw that out there. That's fun. Yeah. You texted me earlier being like, I have the hottest take. I hope you're ready for it. And I'm like, what the fuck is he going to talk about? And that's
this is the best Ghostbusters movie.
You know, honestly, there was a part of me that really did feel that you're like, you know what? It's amazing, and I'm a huge fan, and they need to get Paul Feig back to do the next one.
No, and of course, and a lot of talk about this too. The other MVP, but this comes with an asterisk, is Chris Hemsworth.
Yeah.
Now, Kevin is hilarious. There's no denying it, and especially as an audience, this was our first big indication of how funny Chris Hemsworth can be, like in a big way, right? And like, oh wow, he can improv with these women who improv is a career for, and hold his own. But the asterisk is he's funny, but again, all his scenes don't belong in a Ghostbusters film, right?
Right.
It's a character that you want to see in a different kind of comedy. That whole like him being this so dumb, like it's like, oh, I love that, not for this movie.
And also, he's like Holtzman, not a real person.
Right.
He's just this guy can't function.
Yeah. This guy would not. He couldn't have made it to that age.
No way. Yeah, it's he doesn't even know how phones work in this movie. Like they dumb him down to a point that it is, it could be deemed irresponsible.
Though I will say my favorite joke in the film does come from him, and specifically it's at the very end of the film after like the big battle ends and they're all standing around. I love the moment where he's eating the sandwich and they throw it away, and then he just puts his hand up and someone throws it back to him. Yep. Like that's a good like kind of like weird joke. I like nonsense jokes like that. And then that one actually keeps going where people start like they throw him like a drink and stuff too. And I'm actually a big fan of jokes that go longer than they should. Not riffing that goes longer than it should, but like odd jokes like that. Well, that made me laugh.
I'm a big like I love slapstick comedy, like big Mel Brooks fan, and that feels like that's the kind of movie you get that joke. So I can appreciate that joke on that level. But like you said, completely out of place and should never even be close to this movie.
Yeah, and that really honestly though, that's the thing is I'm surprised to say because I think of the four cast members, Kate McKinnon is probably my favorite one. But Holtzman is really the only character that doesn't work for me on any level. Like, I don't think the film works, but I think Kristen Wiig and Melissa McCarthy are good in it. Yep. And I think, like, their character arcs, like I said, they kind of mess the character arcs up, but I get where they're coming from, and they're both, they're both fine, too. I think Leslie Jones is by far the best. Then I would say Kristen Wiig and Melissa McCarthy are doing what they can and are pretty good. But, yeah, I really just found Holtzman pretty disappointing.
Right. And you definitely would have put the white male Chris Hemsworth on top of all that. Hey, that's crazy.
I remember when I wrote my initial review for this movie on Letterboxd back in the day when I saw it. And I think I said something in there about how I was like, oh God, I hate even saying this, but the funniest person in the movie is Chris Hemsworth. But don't take that the wrong way,
And that's what's sad about like the discourse of the film. That's. It's kind of the truth, but you almost can't say it because then you're in trouble, and it's this you're on this side or you're on the other side, and it's a shame that this movie there was never a conversation about it on its own merit. It was everything influenced everybody's thoughts all the time. Yeah. If you hated Ghostbusters, you were a misogynist. You thought Chris Hemsworth was the best, you hate women. You hate Leslie Jones, you're racist. Which, guess what? We're not racist because we liked Leslie Jones. So, So we have one.
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, I'm sure. It sounds like we're kind of wrapping up this section of it, but that's ultimately the problem, right? Is why did this movie fail? Certainly, the initial kind of discourse around it didn't help because it's a film that arrived with bad buzz because of all that. I remember going to see this on opening day, and there being like nobody in the theater, and just being like, "Uh-oh," just already like this isn't good. Because it definitely did not have that big opening weekend crowd I expected to see. It certainly arrived with a bullseye on it because of everything that formed around it. Go ahead.
It did really prove also the power of Rotten Tomatoes. We didn't even mention that, but this is kind of that first instance.
In particular, the audience element, because it was actually pretty well received critically.
But I'll push back on that because you can't say shit about this movie at the time.
That's the point I was going to make. Again, that was the conversation, and it was like, oh, do people really like this movie, or are they just like performatively saying it's good to push back against all these idiots? So,
and you could like I read at the time. I didn't go revisit a lot of reviews for this, but I remember reading at the time people doing fucking backflips, to say that it was fine.
But no, that's ultimately what it comes down to is, okay, so that's an element of it, but ultimately the bigger element is Ghostbusters is a comedy, and this movie is not funny. It's not funny enough to to stick with you. Because I honestly revisiting it last night for the first time since 2016. It's amazing how much of it I forgot.
Yeah,
and good comedies you remember. You remember all the great bits, and there weren't that many funny jokes to remember. And so the comedy fails, but then also the sci-fi element of it fails because it doesn't put any effort into that part of it. So there's like nothing to latch onto. There's nothing for comedy fans to get super excited about, and there's nothing for Ghostbusters fans to get excited about. This is one where I totally understand its failure, and I think, the filmmakers let this one get out of control, and they just they're ultimately to blame. They made a movie that was not going to satisfy kind of anybody. Now, go ahead.
No, I was going to say we're not. I wanted to make sure too, like we're having a little bit more fun in this one, talking shit about the movie, but I don't revel in its failure either. Like I know we were really high on John Carter for it sucked that this one failed, but we absolutely understand 100% why this one did, and they needed to make a better movie. Just bottom line, they needed to make a better movie. But
and I was gonna, and like you mentioned something like this earlier too, but I will say, and in all fairness, and this is going to be the case of a lot of movies that we don't like, and vice versa and stuff, but I certainly did see this movie has its fans. And in particular, when you get into that gender discourse, and I'm not sure how much this fed out of it becoming a controversy and people feeling like they have to defend it, but I think a lot of it is very genuine. I did see that this movie certainly did have a lot of female fans, and I also saw that a lot of especially young girls like these characters, and we don't want to take that away from anybody. Like if you really enjoy these characters, cool, and but that gets back to where that sucks that then they didn't deliver a film that could have allowed this to be a franchise. Yeah. I will say, these characters do live on somewhat. IDW, the comic book company, has the current Ghostbusters license, and to their credit, they've done something kind of clever where they actually put out comic series about the original movie Ghostbusters, the real Ghostbusters, and then this team.
Oh, okay.
And they eventually actually did like a crossover where this portal opened up and put all three teams together in the same world. So you had the Bill Murray, Dan Aykroyd team interacting with the cartoon versions of them, and then also Abby and her whole group. And it's that's kind of cool, So at least for people who do enjoy these characters, you can get a little bit more of them in the comic book world because you're certainly never going to see them on screen again.
No. Well, and that's a good place to jump off. You wanted to talk about a little bit of what could have been. What could have been if this was successful. I don't know how many people sat through the credits, but there was another. I actually completely forgot about this. I was just sitting there, I think, just kind of gathering my notes, and the credits were still rolling, and then there was a scene. And first of all, it is funny that your female-centric film takes the star female of the first film and puts her in a post-credit scene. So Sigourney Weaver shows up for a thankless role.
Yeah. Well, we mentioned Bill Murray briefly, but we should say all of the surviving Ghostbusters have cameos.
Yes.
Annie Potts gets a cameo too. Dan Aykroyd is the worst just because he has the whole "I ain't afraid no ghost."
Oh yeah, it's cringeworthy.
Oh, and that's a moment too, though, right? Where you're talking about things that they do that can annoy a fan base. I remember thinking when he says "I ain't afraid of no ghost," and then Kristen Wiig goes, "That's a double negative. That means you are afraid of ghosts." It's oh no, you're just insulting the catchphrase of the first film. You're setting yourself up for people to yell at you.
Yeah. But
yeah, the Sigourney Weaver one is maybe the most disappointing one, because that's like, why is it this? Why are they just giving this to her?
And again, especially because of what Paul Feig is seemingly trying to say now. Why relegate her to the post-credits scene that most people aren't going to see? Just doesn't make much sense. But on top of that, there's the radio broadcast, whatever the hell, that Leslie Jones is listening to, and they name Zool. Mm-hmm. Just to remind you again that that's the old movie. So what could have been, I guess, is it's successful, they make the sequel, and guess what? They just redo the first one again.
I know. That's
right?
I
that's what they do.
I hate that post-credit scene so much, because this is that one scene, and this is something we're certainly going to talk about a lot over the course of this show. That one scene is so indicative of like the worst Hollywood tendencies in terms of this idea of franchises, right? Of going like, well, we're rebooting this franchise. We obviously have to redo everything from the first film. Zool was the villain. Well, we'll do Zool again. No, let's say this was a good movie and it spawned sequels. That doesn't mean you ever have to do Zool again.
No.
You make your own villains. Zool is not the Joker. Zool's not Doctor Doom. That's not an iconic character that needs to be revisited. It's the villain from Ghostbusters.
Yeah.
You have your right to like make your own. So I don't know if you came up with any pitches, but I actually think like my idea, if I was in charge of Ghost Corps and this film kind of hit, I actually think the key to, because so every kind of iteration, like when they did Ghostbusters 2, the original Ghostbusters 2, the idea was that even though they saved New York, right, soon after they were forced to this is why people criticize Ghostbusters 2, because it's such a retread of the first film, where it's about them getting back together and you kind of have the same exact arc. I think the sequel to this film, the hypothetical sequel, would be far more interesting if you started and they were still very successful.
Right.
They're just pure heroes. They've been doing this job for years, and they're successful to the point that they now have competitors. And that's where Ghostbusters 2 comes in. You actually use the sequel to introduce another team of Ghostbusters who start like a rival business. Mm-hmm. And that's like kind of the conceit of the film, is this like war between the original Ghostbusters and this new team. And of course you populate that with a bunch of comedic stars too. Yep. You have them be like the team that's kind of messing everything up and making the matters worse. But here's the thing, if it works, and obviously like anything, right? This is the Kong versus Godzilla of it all, or whatever. Right? They're rivals throughout the whole film, but something happens where in the third act they have to work together, right? The two teams work together, and it ends up being the point where they go, well, you know what? Actually, maybe we'll just let you be part of a franchise with us. And it's like, hey, guess what? Now you can actually spin that team off into their own movie if it works. Totally. This is where you actually could create a cinematic universe. Not that I'm not even saying I want to see that, but that's the approach they could have taken, and maybe if with some thought put into it, could have worked.
Well, and I like the idea of even populating with other comedic stars, right? We didn't talk about this actually in the beginning, but there was a lot of talk of like Emma Stone and Channing Tatum to be part of the new Ghostbusters movie. So
yeah, and I remember thinking like, well, God, get Channing Tatum and Jonah Hill on a team together.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, remember with after the 21 Jump Street success, there was talk that they were going to be rebooting Men in Black. And it was going to be this weird crossover thing. So I could.
That is still. I don't know how you feel about that, Chris. That is ultimately one of my I so regret that didn't happen.
Absolutely.
I love that idea so much.
It would have been fantastic.
I think that's still like that. That's one of those rare cases where you hear the pitch and you laugh.
Yeah.
You're like, that's genius. Like crossing over Men in Black with 21 Jump Street. Like
no, it would have been absolutely beautiful, beautiful. Yeah. But yeah, no, populating with another team. I love that. I really do. I love that idea. And it goes back to even the beginning of the first movie, the original movie, of Bill Murray talking about franchising, right? Mm-hmm. And selling the rights to Ghostbusters and making money off of it. It gets back to the original, even, I don't know if theme is what I wanted to say, but the Bill Murray's character, at least, is that he's kind of a dick, right? And he's in it for the money. And this is why they're doing this. They're doing it for the money. So it would be. Yeah, no, I really like that idea. My ideas won't top that. That was a good one.
Well, let's hear your inferior ideas.
No.
Come on, you got to bring. You brought something to the table.
I don't think I did. I don't think I really did.
We're all friends here.
No. I actually don't really have anything.
Was your idea just to wait a couple years and then reboot it with a bunch of kids and make it look like Stranger Things?
Ghost Babies.
Well, I mean, so we should mention. So this franchise is living on. In a non-COVID world, we already would have seen the new Ghostbusters movie.
Yeah.
But this obviously isn't the point of this episode, but do you have any thoughts? So obviously we've only still had one trailer because they delayed any other marketing because the film itself got delayed. That trailer, man, I just have a bad feeling about this again because that trailer is so like ponderous and serious, and it's such like, again, to me it felt like a trailer that was trying to capitulate to this weird fandom that thinks like Ghostbusters is the most important thing in the world, and this trailer being like, oh, it's so reverential in a cringy way, and I'm just like, where are the jokes? Why is nothing funny in this?
It's weirdly, it's the Force Awakens effect. That's just what it is. It's an extremely dramatic tug at your heartstrings, showing does it show Egon's name tag or something, and it's all dusty and shit. And this, it's
because I think the kids are supposed to be like his grandkids or something.
Oh, it's just so dumb.
And I'm like, really, it's like so clearly a Stranger Things like take. Right?
You know what?
Like,
I'll say this. I actually hate the idea of the new one coming up more than I hated the idea of this one starting.
I do too. Yeah.
Right? I would rather root for Ghostbusters 2016 than Ghostbusters Afterlife, I think it's called.
I'll also say I actually felt like, even though I did not enjoy this film and I get why it failed and I wasn't calling for a sequel, I felt their pain. And then when they announced the new one and it came out that they never told like Feig or like the cast that this is the direction they're taking, and they kind of found out when the announcement came out, I felt for him. I was like, that's pretty shitty. Like,
and it's interesting too, like after the rewatch and actually growing to like Leslie Jones in that movie, her reaction to the news was palpable, because she went on a Twitter tear when that happened, and I absolutely get it. I 1000% get it, especially when she puts in the work that she did in that one. So it's a shame, but
and it's one of those sad cases where it kind of gives like all the assholes like a victory, right? Where they feel like, yeah, we won, we get our continuity back.
Yeah.
You know?
The Justice League effect. That's what it is. It's you scream loud enough and you get what you want. You pout and whine, and I honestly, I think Afterlife looks like shit. I don't know. I don't get this as a franchise. I just don't get it. The trailer is just nostalgia porn for a movie that I don't understand the nostalgia for. But fair enough, right? It's obviously gigantic. So
yep. Well, I guess Ghost Corps will keep trying. You don't form a production company for nothing. Dark Universe. But we'll see.
Soon to be discussed.
maybe in year like 7 of this podcast we'll do Ghostbusters Afterlife, or maybe it'll be the next big thing. Who knows?
Yep, who knows? I bet you I know what's going to happen though.
Yeah. All right, so should we talk a little bit about what's to come next episode?
Yep. Next episode is Waterworld from 1995. So that's
right. Enough of this 2010 stuff. Put on your flannels. Get your Alice in Chains shirts out. Going back to the 90s.
Oh my god. Yeah, sure. Do that.
Now, you and I recently have been on a 90s action kick. So this is kind of exciting to go back to a 90s action movie.
Yeah, I don't expect it to be as great as what we've been watching, but
true, yeah.
But yes,
but it is fun to go. It's fun to go back to another one. This is an interesting one because it's not as clear cut of this was clearly trying to be a franchise. But we'll talk next time about why we're pretty sure it was an attempt at a franchise. But this is actually really exciting for me because this is another film I have not seen since the theater, and in this case, that's a very long time. I have not visited, but oddly enough, and this is again, unfortunately, this is a mark against Ghostbusters. I haven't seen this in the theater since what? What did you say? 95?
95. Yep.
95, and I remember more of it. I think.
Oh my god.
Ghostbusters.
Oh my god. Yeah, I actually watched it. I think like 6 or 7 years ago for the first time, but I definitely don't remember. I think I remember the ride more, or the attraction more. But.
The attraction, yeah. Another like very, very infamous bomb. So another one that should be fun to talk about. I guess that will do it for this time. If you want to keep up with us, certainly go watch Waterworld. In the meantime, please, subscribe to our podcast at whatever platform you're listening to. We're all over social media now. We are on Twitter and Instagram at F2FPod. We're also at Facebook. I believe it's actually facebook.com/F2FPod as well. You can go ahead and like us there, like us everywhere.
Yeah, like us there, like us everywhere.
Yeah, that should be our catchphrase. If you're enjoying what you're hearing, tell people about the show. We'd love to, spread our gospel to the rest of the world.
Yeah, no, it's and all the links are in the description of each episode, so there you go. But thank you for listening to this week, and I'm looking forward to going to Waterworld.
Looking forward to getting wet. Is that the way to say it?
Oh.
No? Does that not work?
That did. Oh, never mind. I was gonna make a.
You gonna make a WAP joke?
No, I was gonna make a female Ghostbusters joke, but
no.
Yeah.
Well,
I might cut.
All right.
This.
Well, now that we're canceled, we'll see you next time, everybody.
All right. See ya.